The Palm Grove estate, on the outskirts of Cambridge, was the perfect portrait of the Massachusetts countryside's high society. Imposing mansions hid behind tall walls, while tree-lined streets showcased luxury cars parked in front of meticulously manicured gardens. In house number 47, one of the most elegant in the estate, lived the Montgomery family. Richard Montgomery, a successful entrepreneur in the technology sector, had carved out his place among Cambridge's elite with years of hard work. A widower for 5 years, he divided his time between his company and his 2 young daughters, Helen 8 and Beatrice 6. After 3 years of mourning, Richard found in Patricia Albright, a renowned psychologist, the promise of rebuilding his life and offering the girls the maternal figure they so desperately needed. In the eyes of society, Patricia was the perfect stepmother, elegant, cultured, and dedicated. On social media, she shared harmonious moments with her stepdaughters on outings to the mall or baking cakes in the spacious kitchen. The reality within those walls, however, was quite different when Richard traveled for work. On that Wednesday in March, the Cambridge sky suddenly darkened, announcing a typical late summer storm in New England. Helen and Beatrice returned from their private school, accompanied by the driver, Sebastian, who dropped them off at the mansion's door. The girls entered silently, as they had learned to do so as not to bother Patricia. "Go straight to change your clothes and then come down for your snack," Patricia ordered, without taking her eyes off her laptop screen, where she was finalizing a psychological report. The sisters climbed the marble stairs, clutching their colorful backpacks tightly. In the room they shared, a concession Patricia made. Claiming the girls needed to develop independence gradually, Helen helped Beatrice change out of her uniform into a sweatsuit. "I'm thirsty." "Lena," Beatrice whispered, using the affectionate nickname she had for her older sister. "We'll get juice downstairs. Patricia is waiting." Downstairs, the breakfast nook table was already set with whole wheat crackers, sliced fruit, and 2 glasses of grape juice. The girls sat on the tall chairs, swinging their feet that didn't reach the floor. Patricia entered the kitchen with firm steps, her high heels echoing on the porcelain tile floor. "Helen, how many times do I have to tell you to sit properly?" "Straight back, feet still." The older girl adjusted herself immediately, while Beatrice tried to imitate her sister's posture. As the youngest reached for a cracker, her elbow bumped the glass of juice. The purple liquid spread across the white tablecloth, dripping onto the floor and splashing Patricia's light-colored dress. The silence that followed was terrifying. The girls stopped breathing for an instant, their wide eyes fixed on the spreading stain. Sorry, Beatrice stammered, tears already forming in her brown eyes. Patricia's face transformed. The mask of serenity she usually displayed at parent-teacher meetings and estate parties gave way to a contorted expression of rage. She took a deep breath as if trying to control a primitive impulse, and spoke with an artificial calm that was even more frightening than shouting. "Actions have consequences, Beatrice. You and your sister need to learn that once and for all." Patricia walked to the laundry room and returned with 2 floor cloths. She threw them onto the table, knocking over the plate of crackers. "Clean up this mess. When you're done, I want you both outside." "But it's raining, Aunt Patricia," Helen argued timidly. "Exactly. The rain will wash off the sticky sugar you 2 will be covered in after cleaning this up. And don't call me Aunt. I'm your mother now." The girls cleaned as best they could, their small hands soaked with juice and water. When they finished, Patricia inspected their work with critical eyes. "Terrible, as always, but I expected that." "Now out. Can we get our raincoats?" Helen asked, trying to sound as polite as possible. "No, you need to feel the consequences of your actions. Your school uniform is stained with juice. You'll wash it in the rain." She opened the door to the backyard and practically pushed the girls outside. The rain fell heavily, thick drops that felt like icy needles on the children's delicate skin. In seconds, they were completely drenched. "Stay there until you learn your lesson. And don't you dare try to come in until I allow it." The door was closed and locked. The girls, shivering with cold, sat on the stone steps leading to the garden, partially protected by the small veranda roof. "Daddy will be home soon, right?" Beatrice asked, leaning against her sister for warmth. "He's in New York City today." He only comes back tomorrow," Helen replied, wrapping her arm around her sister's shoulders. Inside, Through the glass door, Patricia watched them while talking on the phone. "Yes, Richard, the girls are doing great. They just had their snack and are now watching a movie. Don't worry, everything is under control here." The sky darkened even more and the rain intensified. The sisters hugged each other tightly, trembling uncontrollably. The service entrance gate, in the corner of the property, slowly opened, revealing a figure trying to shield herself with a colorful umbrella that barely resisted the wind. Joanna Stone, who had worked as a housekeeper in that house for 3 years until she was fired by Patricia 2 months earlier, under the unfounded accusation of theft, was passing by on her way to the bus stop. Looking at the backyard, her heart stopped when she saw the 2 girls she was so fond of, drenched and shivering in the corner of the veranda. She stopped, undecided. She had promised herself never to set foot in that place again after the humiliation she suffered. But the sight of those children, abandoned in the storm, stirred something within her. Instinctively, she placed a hand on her 5-month pregnant belly, as if seeking strength in the child she carried. On an impulse, Joanna walked towards the girls, shielding them with her insufficient umbrella. In their eyes, recognition and a sudden hope. Beatrice exclaimed, her eyes sparkling as she recognized the former employee. "You're back!" Joanna felt a lump in her throat. In her 3 years working at the Montgomery's house, she had formed a special bond with the girls, especially after their biological mother's early passing. When Patricia entered the scene, Joanna was gradually distanced from the children until she was completely removed from their lives. "What are you doing out here in all this rain?" she asked, trying to keep her voice calm despite the growing indignation in her chest. "We spilled juice on the tablecloth," Helen explained, her lips purple with cold. "Aunt Patricia said we have to stay here until we learn our lesson." Joanna took off her coat, covering the 2 girls while trying to reorganize her thoughts. Her first impulse was to knock on the door and confront Patricia, but she knew that would likely worsen the children's situation after she left. "How long have you been out here?" "Since after school," Helen replied. "The kitchen clock said 3 o'clock. Joanna looked at her phone. It was past 5. Those children had been in the rain for over 2 hours. "Where is your father?" she asked, already knowing the answer. "Richard frequently traveled for business, leaving his daughters in his wife's care. In New York City. Comes back tomorrow," Helen said, as Beatrice coughed heavily. The former housekeeper felt her baby stir in her belly, as if also indignant at the situation. During her last months of work in that house, Joanna had witnessed the beginning of Patricia's abusive behavior, constant criticism of the children, disproportionate punishments, psychological manipulation. She tried to warn Richard a few times, but he, charmed by his new wife and too busy with his company, interpreted everything as necessary discipline or Joanna's exaggeration. "Can't anyone come in and get you out of there?" "Only Lord's, but today is her day off," Helen replied, referring to the current housekeeper. "And Sebastian already left after bringing us from school." An idea sparked in Joanna's mind. She had sworn never to contact the Montgomerys again after her unfair dismissal. But this situation demanded breaking promises. "Lend me your phone." "Helen," she asked, extending her hand. The girl hesitated. "Aunt Patricia doesn't let us use the phone." "I know, dear, but it's an emergency. I promise I won't tell her you gave it to me." With trembling fingers, Helen pulled a small, basic cell phone from her soaked pants pocket, one of those for children to contact their parents in case of need. The screen was blurred with water, but it still worked. Joanna knew it was useless to call the house. Patricia would certainly intercept the call. She needed to speak directly with Richard. With a racing heart, she dialed the number she still remembered by heart. "Hello?" Richard's deep voice sounded on the other end of the line after 3 rings. Joanna took a deep breath before answering. "Mr. Montgomery, it's Joanna." A momentary silence. "Joanna, the former housekeeper?" "Yes, sir. I know I promised never to bother you again, but there's something you need to know." "Look, Joanna, I'm in the middle of an important meeting right now, and your daughters have been locked out of the house in the rain for over 2 hours," she interrupted, her voice trembling with nervousness and indignation. "I'm with them here on your back veranda." Another silence, longer this time. When Richard spoke again, his voice was unrecognizable. "Please hand the phone to one of them." Joanna handed the device to Beatrice, who was closer. The girl put the phone to her ear. "Daddy," Her small voice was barely audible over the sound of the rain. "We're having dinner in the rain." That phrase, spoken with the simplicity and innocence of a 6-year-old, struck Richard like lightning. On the other end of the line, he felt his world crumble. "Bea, my love, Daddy is coming home now. Hand the phone back to Joanna, okay?" The girl returned the phone. Richard spoke without preamble. "Joanna, can you stay with them until I get there? I'm leaving New York City right now. I'll be there in 2 hours at most." "Of course, sir," she replied, relieved that he had believed her. "Take them somewhere dry. Do you have money for a taxi?" "Yes, don't worry. Thank you, Joanna, truly." The call ended and Joanna put the phone in her pocket. She looked at the 2 girls trembling under her coat and made a decision. "Let's get out of here, girls. Your father is coming back, but in the meantime, let's get dry and warm." Joanna lived in a small rented apartment in the Grand Meadows neighborhood, just a 10-minute taxi ride from the Palm Grove estate. It wasn't luxurious like the Montgomery's house, but it was cozy and above all safe. During the ride, the girls remained silent, huddled in the back seat of the taxi, still wrapped in Joanna's coat. The driver looked suspiciously in the rearview mirror but asked no questions. Upon arrival, Joanna quickly prepared a warm bath for the children. While Beatrice got into the tub first, Helen remained in the living room, hugging a mug of hot chocolate. "Why didn't you ever come to see us again, Jo?" the older girl asked, her eyes welling up. "We missed you so much." Joanna sat beside her on the worn sofa. "Aunt Patricia said I had done something very wrong, remember? That I had taken things that weren't mine." "But you would never do that," Helen protested. "You're good. Thank you for believing in me, dear." "But sometimes adults complicate things," Joanna replied, stroking the girl's wet hair. "The important thing is that we're together now." After their baths, Joanna dressed the girls in her own t-shirts, which became dresses on the children. She prepared a simple soup, which the sisters ate eagerly as if they hadn't seen food in days. "Patricia says we need to stay in shape," Helen commented when Joanna offered a second serving. "That fat girls don't get boyfriends." Joanna felt her stomach churn at those words. "That's not true, Helen. Children need to eat well to grow strong and healthy." While they were eating dinner, Beatrice started coughing again, this time more forcefully. Joanna noticed that the girl was warm and her cheeks were flushed. Concerned, she looked for the thermometer in the bathroom drawer and confirmed a high fever. "We'll need to take your sister to the emergency room," Joanna told Helen. "She needs a doctor." At Cambridge City Hospital, the on-call doctor examined Beatrice carefully. He diagnosed acute bronchitis, worsened by prolonged exposure to the rain. During the complete physical examination, however, his expression became grave. "Madam, may I speak with you privately?" Dr. Paul Ramirez asked, indicating the door to the examination room. In the hallway, out of earshot of the children, the doctor did not hide his concern. "I found some old bruises on the girl's back and legs. There are also marks of minor burns on her wrists, which appear to have been caused by hot water." Joanna felt her legs weaken. She suspected abuse, but hearing the medical confirmation was devastating. "Are these children under your care?" the doctor asked. "Not exactly. I'm a family friend. Their father is on his way." He didn't know what was happening. Dr. Ramirez nodded, understanding but firm. "I will need to document this and file a report. Depending on the situation, we will have to notify Child Protection Services." At that moment, Helen's cell phone, which Joanna kept in her pocket, began to ring. It was Richard Montgomery, who had just arrived in Cambridge and discovered that his daughters were no longer at the mansion. "We're at the city hospital," Joanna informed him. "Beatrice has bronchitis and a high fever. Mr. Montgomery, there are other things you need to know." 20 minutes later, pale and visibly shaken Richard Montgomery burst through the doors of the pediatric emergency room, his eyes frantically searching for his daughters. When he finally spotted them, sitting next to Joanna on blue plastic chairs, something inside him broke forever. Richard Montgomery seemed to have aged 10 years in those few hours. His face, normally composed and confident, was devastated. He knelt before his daughters, hugging them with an intensity that surprised even Joanna, who watched the scene with tears in her eyes. "Daddy's here now," he murmured, kissing the top of each girl's head. "You're safe." Beatrice, still feverish, snuggled into her father's arms. Helen, always more reserved, also allowed herself to crumble in that embrace as if she could finally release the burden of being strong for her younger sister. "Mr. Montgomery?" Dr. Ramirez's voice interrupted the moment. "May we speak privately?" Richard cast a questioning glance at Joanna, who nodded silently, confirming the seriousness of the situation. He followed the doctor to a small room, while Joanna remained with the girls in the hallway. Inside the consultation room, Dr. Ramirez wasted no time with pleasantries. He showed Richard photographs of the bruises and marks on Beatrice's back and legs, as well as the preliminary results of the examinations. "I found signs of consistent and prolonged abuse," the doctor explained with professional gravity. "The bruises are in different stages of healing, which indicates they were not caused by a single incident." Richard sank heavily into the chair, his breathing ragged. "That's not possible," he murmured, more to himself than to the doctor. "I would know if my daughters were being... Dunno, there must be some mistake." Dr. Ramirez looked at him with a mixture of compassion and firmness. "Mr. Montgomery, children often don't report abuse out of fear or because they are manipulated into believing they deserve the treatment they receive, especially when it comes from authority figures who are supposed to protect them." "Patricia is a child psychologist," Richard protested, still trying to process the information. "She works helping traumatized children, for heaven's sake." "Unfortunately, sir, someone's profession is no guarantee of character," the doctor replied. "I need to inform you that, as a healthcare professional, I have a legal obligation to notify Child Protection Services about these findings." Richard ran his hands through his face, trying to organize his thoughts amidst the whirlwind of emotions. "What happens now?" "The girls will need to undergo a more detailed evaluation, both physical and psychological. In the meantime, I strongly recommend that they do not return to the environment where they likely suffered these abuses." Upon leaving the room, Richard found Joanna still sitting with his daughters. Helen had fallen asleep with her head in the former housekeeper's lap, while Beatrice fought sleep, her eyes half closed, fixed on the door, waiting for her father's return. "Joanna, we need to talk," he said, his voice low and controlled, though his hands trembled. "But not here." Dr. Ramirez approached again. "Beatrice will need to stay overnight for intravenous antibiotics and fever monitoring. Helen can go home, but I recommend both undergo psychological evaluation as soon as possible." Richard nodded, thanking the doctor. While Beatrice was being prepared for admission, he took Helen and Joanna to the hospital cafeteria, a relatively quiet space at that hour of the night. "Helen, my love, can you wait at that table over there? Daddy needs to talk to Joanna for a bit." The girl agreed, still sleepy, and sat a few tables away, distractedly playing with a plastic cup. "How long has this been going on?" Richard asked directly, looking at Joanna. She took a deep breath, gathering courage. "Since you started working more and traveling frequently. About 8 months ago. At first, they were small things. Overly severe punishments for trivial mistakes, humiliating comments, dietary restrictions. Then it got worse. Why didn't you ever tell me?" Joanna looked at him incredulously. "I tried, Mr. Montgomery. 3 times. You said I was exaggerating, that Patricia just had different methods of raising them, and that I shouldn't interfere in family matters." Richard closed his eyes, vaguely remembering those conversations he had dismissed as exaggerated concerns from an employee too attached to the children. "And then you left." "I was fired," Joanna corrected, the hurt still evident in her voice. "Patricia accused me of stealing her jewelry. You believed her without question, without even giving me a chance to defend myself, after 3 years of loyal service." The entrepreneur ran his hands through his graying hair, a gesture that betrayed his nervousness. "Joanna, I don't even know where to begin to apologize." "It's not to me you owe an apology," she replied, looking meaningfully at Helen at the next table. Richard followed her gaze, watching his older daughter who, even in the light sleep she had fallen into with her head resting on her arms, maintained a tense, alert posture, as if expecting to be reprimanded at any moment. His heart painfully constricted. "What should I do now?" "First, keep the girls away from her," Joanna replied without hesitation. "Second, seek legal and psychological help. And third, be present, truly present this time." Richard nodded, recognizing the wisdom of those words. After a moment of silence, he noticed Joanna's belly visible under the simple blouse she wore. "Are you Do you started pregnant? Yes, 5 months, she confirmed, instinctively running her hand over her belly. Life went on after I left your house, Mr. Montgomery. The father? Joanna looked away. He's no longer present. A nurse approached, interrupting their conversation. Mr. Montgomery? Your daughter is settled in room 204. You can accompany her now. Richard stood up, but before following the nurse, he looked at Joanna intently. I don't know how to thank you for what you did today. I didn't do it for you, she replied sincerely. I did it for them. I understand. Even so, I am eternally grateful. He hesitated for a moment before continuing. I know I have no right to ask for anything more, but could you stay? At least tonight? The girls trust you, and I don't know how to handle all this alone. Joanna considered the proposal for a few moments. She had a morning shift at the cafe where she currently worked, but she could ask to swap with a colleague. She looked at the sleeping Helen and thought of Beatrice, fragile in some hospital room. These children had been a part of her life for so long. I'll stay tonight, she finally agreed. Tomorrow we'll see what to do. The early morning hours found Richard and Joanna in the hospital room where Beatrice slept, connected to an antibiotic drip. Helen had been settled in a reclining armchair, covered with her father's coat. The night had been long, with Beatrice's fever fluctuating, and quiet conversations between the adults. As the rising sun began to illuminate the room through the half-open blinds, Richard made a decision. He took his cell phone from his pocket and made a call. Dr. Rivers? Sorry to call so early. I need your urgent help. Yes, it's a family emergency. No, I can't explain over the phone. Can you meet me at the city hospital in an hour? Thank you. Joanna looked at him interrogatively. My lawyer, Richard explained. I'm going to request the immediate suspension of Patricia's custody rights over the girls and initiate divorce proceedings today. At that very moment, Richard's phone vibrated with a message. It was Patricia, asking where he was and why he had returned to Cambridge without warning. He turned off the device without responding. She still doesn't know we found out, Joanna observed. And she won't know until we have legal protection for the girls, he replied, determination evident in his voice. At 9 in the morning, Dr. Mark Rivers, the Montgomery family's longtime lawyer, entered the hospital room. He was a middle-aged man with graying hair and a habitually impassive expression, which dissolved into shock as he listened to Richard's account and saw the medical reports. This is extremely serious. Richard, the lawyer commented after examining the documentation. We have enough evidence to request an emergency protective order. Patricia will not be able to approach the girls until the case is judged. How long does that take? Richard asked, anxious. The protective order can be issued in a matter of hours given the medical report. As for the divorce and custody battle, that could take months. Richard nodded, processing the information. Do whatever is necessary. I don't want her near my daughters ever again. Dr. Rivers made some notes in his folder and prepared to leave. I'm going to the courthouse right now. Where should I meet you afterward? Richard looked at Joanna, who remained silent beside Beatrice's bed. Where are we going when we're discharged? He asked, suddenly aware that they couldn't return to the mansion where Patricia still was. I suggest a hotel for now, the lawyer replied. Until we have the protective order in hand. It's best to keep your distance. Joanna, who had been following the conversation in silence until then, cleared her throat discreetly. If I may suggest, Mr. Montgomery, my apartment isn't big, but it has 2 bedrooms. You could stay there until you find a more suitable place. The offer surprised both Richard and the lawyer. After everything that had happened, after the way she had been treated, Joanna was still reaching out to help. I can't accept, Joanna. You've already done too much for us. Think of the girls, she insisted. A familiar place with someone they know and trust would be less traumatic than an impersonal hotel. Richard looked at his sleeping daughters and knew Joanna was right. The girls would need all the emotional stability possible in the difficult days ahead. The news that Richard Montgomery, one of Cambridge's most respected entrepreneurs, had abruptly abandoned his wife and moved into his former housekeeper's small apartment, spread like wildfire through the city's social circles. Patricia, feeling humiliated and betrayed, quickly constructed her own version of events. 2 weeks after the rain incident, while Beatrice finished her bronchitis treatment and Helen began to show the first signs of emotional recovery, The war of narratives exploded on social media. "Exemplary family man or opportunistic predator?" was the headline of Society and Power magazine, a local publication that covered the social events of Cambridge's elite. In the article, photos of Richard and Joanna, taken from a distance as they left the hospital, were displayed alongside insinuations about a supposed long-standing relationship between the two. "The ideal husband abandoned me for a pregnant housekeeper," Patricia declared in an exclusive interview with Cambridge TV's morning show. With teary eyes and a choked voice, she recounted how she had been discarded after 3 years dedicated to raising her stepdaughters as if they were her own children. "I always knew there was something between them, but I never imagined Richard would be capable of abandoning our family for an affair." In Joanna's small apartment, now temporarily inhabited by 4 people, the atmosphere was one of controlled tension. Richard had set up a makeshift desk in the living room, from where he managed his company remotely while trying to protect his daughters from the media storm that was brewing. "We need to respond to these accusations," insisted Dr. Rivers, who visited the apartment daily to update Richard on the ongoing proceedings. "Patricia is manipulating public opinion. If this continues, it could affect the custody case." Richard, who had spent the previous night comforting Beatrice after another nightmare, looked exhausted. "I don't want to expose my daughters even more." "We don't need to expose the girls," the lawyer argued. "But you need to defend yourself. Patricia is building an image of a dedicated mother abandoned by her unfaithful husband." Joanna, who was preparing lunch in the small open-plan kitchen, timidly intervened. "Perhaps we should focus on what really matters, the children's safety. The truth will eventually come out." Richard looked at her with admiration. In the past 2 weeks, Joanna had transformed her modest apartment into a refuge for everyone. Even pregnant and working part-time at the neighborhood cafe, she found the energy to cook, help the girls with the online homework the school sent, and still remain strong in the face of the media storm. "Joanna is right," Richard agreed. "I won't play Patricia's game. We have the medical reports, the Child Protection Services report, and the truth on our side." What Richard didn't expect was that Patricia would further escalate her accusations. The next morning, new evidence appeared on social media, seemingly compromising photos of Richard and Joanna, taken years earlier during family events, but carefully cropped to suggest intimacy. Along with the images, text messages supposedly exchanged between the two, obviously fabricated, but convincing enough to fuel the scandal. "She falsified evidence," Dr. Rivers stated, analyzing the images on his tablet. "This is a crime, Richard. We can prosecute her for defamation and falsification of evidence." Richard ran his hands through his face, trying to contain his frustration. "Do whatever is necessary, Mark. Just don't let this affect the custody case." On the afternoon of that same day, while Helen and Beatrice were in their first session with Dr. Lucy Miller, the child psychologist recommended by Child Protection Services, Richard received a call that would change the course of events. "Mr. Montgomery?" "This is Sebastian, the driver," said the hesitant voice on the other end of the line. "I need to speak with you personally. It's about Ms. Albright and the girls." Sebastian Silva had worked for the family for over 10 years, having been hired during Richard's marriage to his first wife. He was a discreet and loyal man who rarely got involved in family matters beyond his duties as a driver. 2 hours later, in Cambridge's Central Square, Richard met with his employee. Sebastian seemed nervous, constantly looking around as if he feared being seen. "Mr. Montgomery, I'm taking a big risk coming here," he began, sitting on the bench next to his former employer. "Ms. Albright threatened to sue any employee who maintained contact with you." "Thank you for coming anyway, Sebastian. What do you need to tell me?" The driver took a deep breath before continuing. "I have proof, sir. Recordings from the house's security cameras. Ms. Albright doesn't know there are automatic cloud backups, accessible only with the master code you gave me last year." Richard felt a chill down his spine. "What kind of recordings?" "Punishments, sir. Many punishments. The girls being locked in the basement, going without food, taking cold showers in winter." Sebastian paused, visibly disturbed. "I should have spoken sooner, I'm sorry. I was afraid of losing my job, of not being able to support my family." "Don't blame yourself, Sebastian. Richard interrupted, placing a hand on the man's shoulder. "You're doing the right thing now. How can I access these recordings?" The driver handed him a flash drive. "I've downloaded everything here. They're from the last 6 months. There are also recordings of Ms. Albright falsifying medical documents. She invented illnesses for the girls, said they had psychological problems." That revelation hit Richard like a punch. He remembered Patricia mentioning that Helen had depressive tendencies and that Beatrice exhibited compulsive behaviors, diagnoses that she, as a psychologist, claimed she could identify. At the time, he blindly trusted her professional expertise. "Sebastian, you saved my daughters," Richard said, his voice choked with emotion. "I don't know how to thank you. Just do justice, sir. Those girls don't deserve to suffer anymore." Upon returning to Joanna's apartment with the flash drive in hand, Richard felt a mixture of hope and apprehension. The evidence could finally turn the tide in his favor, but it also meant that his daughters had suffered far more than he imagined. Joanna immediately noticed that something had changed. "What happened?" "We have proof," he replied simply, showing the flash drive. "House security recordings." Sebastian saved them. Joanna's eyes widened. "This changes everything." While waiting for the girls to return from therapy, accompanied by a social worker from Child Protection Services, Richard and Joanna watched some of the recordings. The images were disturbing. Patricia screaming at the children for minor mistakes, forcing them to kneel for hours, locking them in dark rooms. In one particularly shocking scene, she was seen throwing hot water on Beatrice's hands as punishment for accidentally breaking a porcelain cup. "My God," Joanna murmured, covering her mouth with her hands. "How did I not realize it was so serious?" Richard, pale and trembling, couldn't tear his gaze from the screen. "It's my fault. I brought that woman into our home. I left my daughters with her. I trusted her." Joanna placed a hand on his. "Don't torment yourself, Richard. Patricia deceived everyone. She's a psychologist. She knows how to manipulate people. The important thing is that now we have a way to protect the girls." The next morning, Dr. Rivers received the flash drive with the recordings and immediately petitioned the judge overseeing the case. The material was so compelling that a special hearing was scheduled for the following week. Meanwhile, Patricia intensified her defamation campaign. Now, in addition to accusing Richard of infidelity, she suggested that he and Joanna had planned everything to separate her from the stepdaughters she loved so much. "They wanted to destroy me because I discovered their affair," she declared in interviews. "Richard never accepted that I set limits for the girls. He raised them without discipline, and when I tried to introduce rules, he removed me from the house." The lowest blow came when Patricia released manipulated photos of Joanna supposedly stealing jewelry from the mansion, the same accusation she had used to fire her months earlier. The former housekeeper, now 6 months pregnant, saw her image circulate on social media alongside sensational headlines like "The Con Artist Nanny" and "From Housekeeper to Mistress." How Joanna Stone conquered one of Cambridge's richest men. The pressure was immense. Richard considered moving to a hotel to protect Joanna from the exposure, but she firmly refused. "I won't let her separate us." The girls need stability now more than ever. The children, fortunately, were relatively protected from the scandal. They continued with online classes and therapy sessions, slowly developing the confidence to talk about the abuse they had suffered. In the third session, Helen finally opened up to Dr. Lucy. "Aunt Patricia said it was our secret," the girl explained, drawing a shadowy figure on a sheet of paper. "That if we told Daddy, he would be mad at us for being bad girls, and that no one would believe us because she was a mind doctor and knew best." In another session, Beatrice produced a drawing that left all the adults present in shock. A tall woman holding what looked like a belt, with 2 small figures kneeling in the rain. When asked about the drawing, the girl simply replied, "It's dinner in the rain." That drawing, later attached to the court case, became a powerful symbol of the cruelty the children had faced. At the hearing scheduled for the presentation of new evidence, Judge Philip Gomes didn't even need to see all the recordings to make his decision. The courtroom at Cambridge Courthouse was silent when Judge Philip Gomes returned after a 15-minute recess. Those present, lawyers, social workers, forensic psychologists, and the involved parties, tensely awaited the decision that could forever change the fate of 2 children. Richard, seated next to Dr. Rivers, tried to maintain his composure, though his restless leg betrayed his state of nervousness. Across the room, Patricia displayed a serene, almost victimized expression, perfectly rehearsed to convey the image of an unjustly wronged wife she had been cultivating publicly. After analyzing the new evidence presented, the judge began, adjusting his reading glasses. This court finds that there is substantial proof of continued child abuse against the minors Helen and Beatrice Montgomery, under the care of Ms. Patricia Albright. A murmur ran through the room. Patricia visibly paled, while her lawyer, Dr. Ronald Brooks, leaned in to whisper something in her ear. The recordings from the residential security system, the judge continued, as well as the medical and psychological reports, leave no doubt about the abusive nature of the relationship established by the defendant with the children. Particularly disturbing is the finding that Ms. Albright, leveraging her training as a psychologist, manipulated diagnoses and falsified medical documents, behavior that this court considers especially serious and unethical. Richard closed his eyes, feeling a wave of relief mixed with pain as he thought about what his daughters had endured. Dr. Rivers squeezed his shoulder in solidarity. Therefore, the judge proceeded, I order the definitive suspension of Miss Patricia Albright's custody rights regarding the minors. Sole custody will be granted to the father, Mr. Richard Montgomery, with supervised visits to be reconsidered, only after a complete psychological evaluation of the defendant and upon recommendation from the professionals responsible for the children's care. Patricia stood up abruptly, her face contorted in an expression Richard had never seen before, the mask of serenity completely dissolved by rage. This is absurd. They are my daughters. I raised them. Richard, tell the truth. Tell them what you and that little housekeeper plotted against me. The judge banged his gavel forcefully. Miss Albright, control yourself, or you will be removed from the room. Dr. Brooks tried to calm his client, but Patricia was beyond control. Years of careful manipulation crumbled before her eyes. You don't understand. I was disciplining those children. They needed limits. Richard never knew how to raise them. Remove the lady from the room, the judge ordered a bailiff who approached Patricia. Before being escorted out, she cast a final, hate-filled glance in Richard's direction. I must add, the judge continued after the defendant's exit, that I am referring the case to the district attorney's office for investigation of the accusations of falsification of medical documents, which constitute a crime. I also order that the State Board of Psychology be notified of the unethical conduct of the professional in question. After the hearing, as they walked to the courthouse parking lot, Dr. Rivers could not contain his enthusiasm. It was a complete victory, Richard. I rarely see a judge so forceful in his determinations. Richard, however, seemed more exhausted than relieved. The girls are safe. That's what matters. And what about her accusations against you and Joanna? Do you want me to file a defamation lawsuit? Richard shook his head negatively. No more legal battles for now. I want to focus on my daughter's recovery. In Joanna's apartment, Helen and Beatrice played in the small living room under the watchful eye of the social worker assigned by the judge to oversee the transition. Joanna, who had been unable to attend the hearing due to pregnancy-related discomfort, anxiously awaited news. When Richard entered, one look was enough for her to understand the outcome. A smile of relief lit up her tired face, and silent tears streamed down her cheeks. The girls ran to hug their father, who knelt to receive them. You're going to stay with me forever, he said, hugging his daughters tightly. I promise I'll never let anyone hurt you again. Beatrice, with the innocence of her 6 years, asked, And Aunt Patricia, will she come back? Richard exchanged a glance with the social worker, who nodded slightly, indicating that honesty was important at that moment. No, my love. Aunt Patricia did wrong things and won't live with us anymore. Will she be angry? The little one insisted, fear still present in her voice. Even if she's angry, she can't do anything to you, Richard replied firmly. The judge said you're protected now. Helen, always more perceptive, looked from Richard to Joanna. Are we going to keep living here with Joe? That question caught the adults by surprise. Richard and Joanna had briefly discussed the next steps, but had not yet reached a definitive conclusion. The apartment was too small for four, especially with Joanna's baby's imminent arrival. For now, yes, Richard answered cautiously, but soon we'll need to find a bigger house for all of us. The implication of those words did not go unnoticed by Joanna, who stared at him in surprise. The social worker, sensing the delicate moment, suggested taking the girls for ice cream in the nearby park, giving the adults some time to talk. When they were alone, Richard sat beside Joanna on the worn sofa. "I didn't plan to say it like this. In fact, I don't even know exactly what I'm proposing." Joanna smiled softly. "I think I do. You want us to continue as we are, but in a larger space." "It's more than that," Richard admitted. "These weeks here, despite all the pain and confusion, have shown me what's truly important. You took care of my daughters when I failed. You showed them what unconditional love is without judgment. And somehow you rescued me too." Joanna lowered her eyes, emotional. "I did what anyone would do." "No, Joanna. You did what few people would have the courage to do." Richard took a deep breath before continuing. "I'm not proposing marriage or anything like that. It would be unwise after everything we've just been through. But I would like you to consider building this family with us, in whatever way is best for you and your baby." Joanna placed her hand on her belly, where her baby stirred, as if also participating in that decision. "Richard, you don't even know who this child's father is. Does it matter?" The sincerity of that question caught Joanna off guard. In recent months, she had grown accustomed to facing judgment for being a single mother. Richard's unconditional acceptance was something new and disconcerting. "Yes and no," she finally replied. "It matters because it's part of my story, but it doesn't matter for what we're building now." Richard nodded, understanding. "When you're ready to talk about it, I'll be here to listen, without judgment." "The father is Edward, the son of the cafe owner where I work," Joanna revealed, feeling that honesty was the best path. "It was brief shortly after my dismissal. When I discovered the pregnancy, he made it clear he didn't want involvement. He even moved out of town." "I'm sorry," Richard said sincerely. "I got over it," Joanna stated with determination. "I decided to raise my child alone, and was at peace with it. Then the girls reappeared in my life, and you too, and everything changed again." They remained silent for a few moments, contemplating how much their lives had intertwined due to unexpected circumstances. "Let's do this," Joanna finally proposed. "Rent a larger house with space for everyone. We live as friends, as family, without labels or expectations, day by day. If something more is destined to happen between us, let it happen naturally." Richard smiled, relieved by the wisdom of that proposal. "Sounds perfect." In the weeks that followed, life began to find a new rhythm. Richard rented a comfortable house in a quiet residential neighborhood, with 4 bedrooms and a small garden. Nothing comparable to the mansion in the luxury estate, but infinitely more welcoming. Helen and Beatrice, still in weekly therapy with Dr. Lucy, began to show significant signs of recovery. Nightmares became less frequent. Startling at sudden movements decreased, and most importantly, spontaneous smiles reappeared. Joanna, now in her 7th month of pregnancy, organized the baby's room with the enthusiastic help of the girls, who were enchanted with the prospect of having a little brother, as they affectionately referred to the child to come. Richard, in turn, reorganized his professional life to be more present. He reduced travel, delegated responsibilities, and set up a home office that allowed him to work without being completely absent. The family routine solidified. Breakfast together every morning, Richard taking the girls to school while Joanna rested, now off work on medical advice, lunches prepared together on weekends, home cinema sessions on Friday nights. However, not everything was rosy. Patricia's shadow still loomed over the family, especially when the date of her trial for falsifying documents was set. The local media, which had gradually lost interest in the Montgomery scandal after the custody hearing, returned to cover the case with sensational headlines. Furthermore, despite the legal victories, Richard still struggled with guilt for not having noticed the signs of abuse. Frequently, he would wake up in the middle of the night after dreaming of the disturbing images from the security cameras, of the bruises on Beatrice's back, of the dinner in the rain drawing that was now framed in Dr. Lucy's office as a constant reminder of childhood resilience. On one of those sleepless nights, He found Joanna in the kitchen, also awake due to the baby's incessant movements. "I think he's going to be a soccer player," she joked, stroking her visibly agitated belly. "He doesn't stop kicking." Richard smiled, sitting beside her at the kitchen table with a cup of chamomile tea. "Have you thought of a name?" "I haven't decided yet," Joanna confessed. "I wanted something that meant a new beginning, a new chance." "Renato," Richard suggested. "It comes from Latin, means reborn." Joanna tried the name aloud. "Renato Stone sounds good." "Or it could be Renato Montgomery if you prefer," Richard offered, surprising her again. "Richard, I'm not proposing anything beyond ensuring he has the same rights and protections as my daughters," he quickly clarified. "I know it's a huge decision, and you don't have to answer now. Just think about it." Renato's birth happened on a rainy October dawn, almost 6 months after the fateful day Joanna found Helen and Beatrice drenched on the Montgomerys' veranda. The baby, healthy and with surprisingly potent lungs, transformed the house's dynamic with his crying and constant demands. Richard, who had never actively participated in his daughter's first months due to professional demands at the time, was surprised by his own ability to wake up in the middle of the night to help with bottles. Helen and Beatrice, in turn, took on their roles as older sisters with almost comical seriousness, vying for the privilege of holding little Renato when he was awake and calm. Life seemed to finally find a balance. The girls returned to attending school in person, now at a smaller, less elite institution where they quickly adapted. Richard completely reorganized his company, prioritizing projects that required less travel and implementing remote work policies that allowed him to be present in the family's daily life. Joanna, fully dedicated to Renato in the first months, began to plan a gradual return to the job market, this time not as a housekeeper, but as a pedagogy student, an old dream that Richard had encouraged her to resume. Patricia's shadow, however, still loomed over them. The criminal proceedings for falsifying documents were ongoing in court, and occasionally some news about the case appeared in the local media, rekindling memories that everyone preferred to forget. The girls, though well on their way to recovery, still had moments of regression, especially Beatrice, who occasionally woke up screaming in the middle of the night, convinced she was locked in the dark basement of the old house. It was on a quiet Saturday afternoon, when Richard was preparing a barbecue in the backyard while the children played in the small plastic pool set up to alleviate the approaching summer heat, that the phone call came. Dr. Rivers rarely called on weekends, unless it was something truly important. "Richard, we have a situation," the lawyer said without preamble. Patricia made a formal request to the judge to see the girls one last time before the trial. Richard felt his blood run cold. "That's absurd. After everything she did. The judge won't grant that, will he?" "The problem is she's playing it well," Dr. Rivers explained. "She's cooperating fully with the investigation, has confessed to falsifying documents, and is in intensive therapy. Her lawyer argues that she is genuinely remorseful and that a supervised meeting would help both her recovery and the children's healing process." "No way," Richard replied immediately. "I will not expose my daughters to that woman again." "The judge hasn't decided yet," the lawyer continued, "but the forensic psychologist who is evaluating Patricia has issued a favorable opinion for the meeting, provided it is strictly supervised and interrupted at the first sign of discomfort from the children." Richard hung up, promising to think about it, but his decision was already made. He would never allow Patricia to approach Helen and Beatrice again. That night, after the children had gone to sleep, he shared the news with Joanna, expecting to find the same indignation in her. To his surprise, Joanna listened attentively and then responded with a completely different perspective. "I think you should consider allowing the meeting." "What? How can you say that? After everything she did?" Joanna adjusted little Renato in her arms, who had fallen asleep during breastfeeding. "Richard, think about it. The girls are still afraid of her. In their minds, Patricia remains this powerful and terrifying figure. Seeing her now in a controlled environment, with you and professionals present, could help them realize that she no longer has power over them." Richard shook his head, incredulous. "It's too risky. What if she tries to manipulate them again? What if it causes a setback in all the progress they've made?" "That's why the meeting would be supervised," Joanna insisted softly. And remember, it's not just about the girls facing Patricia. It's about them realizing their own power. Helen is stronger now. Beatrice too. They are no longer those scared children on the veranda. Richard remained silent, absorbing those words. Part of him recognized the wisdom in what Joanna was saying, but the fear of seeing his daughters suffer again was paralyzing. Talk to Dr. Lucy, Joanna suggested, getting up to put Renato in his bassinet. See what she thinks. She knows the girls better than anyone right now. At the next consultation, Dr. Lucy surprised Richard by agreeing with Joanna. Unconquered fear tends to grow in the shadows, the psychologist explained. Sometimes confronting it under safe conditions is the path to true liberation. After a week of deep reflection and discussions with the psychological team accompanying the girls, Richard finally agreed to the meeting under strictly controlled conditions. It would be in a special room at the courthouse. With his presence, Dr. Lucy's social workers and a bailiff's. It would last a maximum of 20 minutes and would be immediately interrupted if any of the children showed discomfort. The hardest part was explaining the situation to Helen and Beatrice. To Richard's surprise, after the initial shock, both showed a cautious curiosity about the meeting. "Can she still hurt us?" Beatrice asked, concern evident in her brown eyes. "No, my love," Richard assured her, hugging her tightly. "She can't do anything to you anymore. Daddy will be there the whole time, along with Dr. Lucy and other people who will ensure you are safe." "I'm not afraid of her anymore," Helen declared with a conviction that surprised Richard. "Dr. Lucy said what she did was wrong and it wasn't our fault." On the day scheduled for the meeting, Richard was so nervous he could barely drive to the courthouse. Joanna, who stayed home with Renato, hugged each of the girls before they left and whispered words of encouragement. The room designated for the meeting was small but welcoming, decorated in neutral colors with some toys on the shelves, clearly designed for situations like this. Richard, Helen and Beatrice arrived first and were greeted by Dr. Lucy and the social worker, Ms. Martha Olson. "How are you feeling?" the psychologist asked the girls. "A little nervous," Helen admitted. "My tummy feels funny," Beatrice added, describing her anxiety in her own way. "It's normal to feel that way," Dr. Lucy assured them. "Remember what we practiced. Deep breaths when you get nervous, and you can ask to stop at any time." At exactly 10 o'clock, the door opened and Patricia entered, accompanied by her lawyer and a bailiff. Richard was shocked by her appearance. The elegant and always impeccable woman he had known was visibly worn down, thinner, with deep dark circles under her eyes and hair without its former shine. The girls instinctively moved closer to Richard when Patricia entered, but they did not show the terror he feared seeing. Helen, in particular, kept her gaze fixed on her ex-stepmother, almost like a silent challenge. "Hello, Helen, Beatrice," Patricia greeted, her voice devoid of the authority she used to display. "Thank you for agreeing to see me." For a few moments, no one said anything. The silence hung heavy in the room, dense as clouds before a storm. It was Beatrice who finally broke it, with the cutting honesty only children possess. "Why were you mean to us?" The question, simple and direct, caught all the adults by surprise. Patricia blinked several times as if trying to hold back tears before answering. I was wrong, Beatrice," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "What I did to you has no excuse. I thought I was teaching discipline, but I was just repeating what was done to me when I was a child." Richard felt a chill. In all their years together, Patricia had never mentioned childhood traumas. She always described her family as traditional and structured. "That doesn't justify it," Helen interjected, surprising everyone again with her maturity. "Jo also had a difficult life, but she's good to us." Upon hearing Joanna's name, something shifted in Patricia's gaze. For a brief instant, Richard feared seeing the old hatred resurface, but what appeared was something different, almost like resignation. "You're right, Helen," Patricia agreed. "Nothing justifies what I did. And yes, Joanna knew how to do what I couldn't." The conversation continued for a few more minutes, with the girls asking surprisingly mature questions, and Patricia responding with an honesty Richard had never witnessed during their marriage. There were no major confrontations or dramatic moments, just a strange and solemn exchange of truths. When the allotted time was up, the social worker gently indicated that the meeting should conclude. Patricia stood up, visibly emotional. "Thank you for listening to me. I hope that one day you can find forgiveness in your hearts, even if I don't deserve it." She looked at Richard. "You have a beautiful family now. Protect them better than you protected them when they were with me." As they left the courthouse, Richard noticed something different in the girls. It wasn't exactly happiness, but there was a lightness, as if an invisible weight had been lifted from their small shoulders. "She seemed sad," Beatrice commented on the way home. "People who hurt others are usually sad inside," Richard replied, surprised by his own perception. "But that doesn't make what she did right." "I told her I'm not scared anymore," Helen declared proudly. "And it's true, Daddy, I really am not." Silent tears streamed down Richard's face as he drove back home, to Joanna, to Renato, to the new life they were building together. An imperfect life, full of challenges, but founded on something that had never existed in his previous marriage: truth. In the weeks that followed, the transformation in the girls was remarkable. Beatrice's nightmares became rare, and Helen began to show a renewed interest in activities she had abandoned during her time under Patricia's care, like drawing and playing the small keyboard she had received for her previous birthday. 2 months after the meeting at the courthouse, Patricia was tried and convicted of falsifying documents and child abuse. She received a 3-year sentence, which was converted to community service and mandatory psychiatric treatment, given her cooperation with justice and absence of prior criminal records. The news reached the Montgomery family on a sunny Sunday, while everyone enjoyed a picnic in the backyard. Richard read Dr. Rivers' message on his phone and shared the information with Joanna, who was holding 5-month-old Renato, who was trying to crawl on the blanket spread on the grass. "Do you think we should tell the girls?" he asked, watching Helen and Beatrice play happily with the hose, drenching each other under the summer sun. Joanna smiled, adjusting the baby in her lap. "They'll know when the time is right. For now, just let them be children." Richard nodded, recognizing the wisdom of that woman who had entered his life in the most unexpected way possible, and who, without imposing conditions or expectations, had taught him and his daughters the true meaning of family. That day, when a sudden summer rain surprised everyone in the backyard, there was no rush inside the house. Instead, the 3 children, for Renato was also there, protected in Joanna's arms, and the 2 adults stayed there, laughing as they got wet, transforming what was once a symbol of trauma into a new memory, full of joy. "We're having dinner in the rain," Beatrice exclaimed, giving new meaning to that phrase that once carried so much pain. And so, under the warm late summer rain in Cambridge, 5 people whom fate had brought together in the most unexpected ways celebrated not only overcoming adversity, but also rediscovering something many seek and few find: a place to call home. Dear listeners, we hope Helen and Beatrice's story has deeply touched your hearts. To continue experiencing emotions like these, we have prepared a special playlist with other equally engaging narratives. Find it by clicking here to the side. If this journey of overcoming and family reconstruction has touched your soul, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave your like. Daily we bring stories that explore the complexity and beauty of human relationships. And you, have you faced a storm that turned into a blessing? Tell us in the comments. Your story could be the next to inspire thousands of people.